The movie kicks off with Frank sitting in a car, putting on his gloves, preparing to leave. Suddenly, a woman taps on his windshield, seeking help for a flat tire. Despite her request, Frank declines. The woman, however, pulls out a gun, threatening Frank to either help her or face consequences. She instructs him to exit the car. Thugs then approach, attempting to start Frank's car but fail. Frank claims it will start with a code, irritating the thugs, who attack him. Despite the woman holding a gun, Frank remains unfazed and orders her to leave. Subsequently, Frank drives to a school to pick up a boy named Jack. Jack joins Frank in the car, discussing the rules he must follow. Jack agrees to respect the car as the first rule. The second rule is to greet Frank, which Jack promptly does. Despite Frank suggesting Jack might be tired from school, Jack insists it's Friday and there's no homework. Eventually, they engage in a guessing game. Frank gives a clue about something white and round but not always present. Jack guesses a tennis ball, but Frank corrects him, stating that tennis balls are yellow. Frank provided Jack with a clue, describing something that is sometimes half, sometimes full, and sometimes in pieces. Jack guessed Brad, but his answer was incorrect. Frank continued the game, offering the next clue about something that is sometimes light, sometimes dark, and sometimes both. Jack guessed bulb and then pizza, but both were wrong. Upon arriving at Jack's house, Frank noticed Jack's parents arguing. Before leaving, he gave Jack one last clue, hinting that everyone wants to step on it, but only a few can. A short while later, Audrey approached Jack, and he explained that he was playing a game with Frank. Jack asked his mom for help with Frank's question, and Audrey whispered the correct answer, the moon. Jack exited Frank's car, and Audrey spoke with Frank, sensing a closeness between him and Jack. Audrey, wanting Frank to work for her husband Jefferson, expressed this, but Frank declined. Audrey mentioned she needed to prepare a surprise party for Jack's birthday and that she was supposed to take him to the doctor the next day. Frank volunteered to take Jack to the doctor. As they conversed, someone monitored their conversation through a hidden speaker near Audrey's house. Afterward, Frank left Audrey's house, and a parked car in front held a man sitting in front of a computer screen. He received a call, revealing a change of plans for the next day, involving someone practicing martial arts by the sea. Another man approached him. He mentioned a change in plans for the next morning. She entered the house to meet Vassal, who provided her with poison and an antidote. Later that evening, Frank tuned into the TV news reporting that 6 ministers from the Latin American drug unit had arrived in Miami for a meeting. Out of the blue, Audrey appeared at Frank's house, expressing confusion and a sense of being lost. Despite Audrey attempting to kiss Frank, he declined as he found it inappropriate. Eventually, Audrey decided to return home. The following morning, 2 men and a woman named Lola visited the doctor's office where Frank and Jack were scheduled to go. Upon entering, they shot the nurse and doctor. Meanwhile, Frank and Jack arrived and entered Dr. Coblin's room. Lola, disguised as a nurse, welcomed them. Frank mentioned having an appointment with Dr. Coblin, but Lola claimed he had the flu. Jack, disappointed, aimed to cure the flu. Subsequently, Frank and Jack headed to room 1B. A thug posing as a doctor named Dr. Tiber informed them that Dr. Coblin was dealing with an emergency, making Frank suspicious. Frank questioned the inconsistency, as the nurse had mentioned Dr. Coblin having the flu, not an emergency. The thugs justified it by stating the emergency was a cold. Jack, accompanied by the thugs, entered the room. Although Frank wanted to join Jack, he was asked to wait outside. Shortly afterward, Frank received a call from the inspector who had arrived from France. Suddenly, he overheard Lola conversing on the phone, mentioning Dr. Dionet's absence. Frank noticed one of the thugs wearing a doctor's coat labeled with Dr. Dez's name, triggering a suspicion. He promptly ended the call with the inspector and hurried to find Jack. Engaging the 2 thugs, Frank attempted to rescue Jack, successfully fending them off. Lola, however, aimed to shoot Frank. Evading her, he devised a trap that caused a partial explosion in the building. Afterwards, Frank and Jack headed for the elevator, but Lola discovered their escape. Despite this, Frank and Jack managed to leave the premises. Lola, realizing the mission had failed, contacted her associate in the parking lot, who placed something on Frank's car. Shortly afterward, Frank departed. Meanwhile, Lola, anticipating Frank's passage, waited at the front. Frank skillfully passed by Lola without being shot. Moments later, Lola informed Gianni that Frank and Jack had escaped. She proposed executing Plan B. Frank and Jack arrived at Audrey's building, but just as they were about to enter, Frank received a call from Gianni. Gianni expressed dissatisfaction, stating that Frank had disrupted his plan, urging him to rectify it. Lola, with a heavy heart, arrived, and Frank reluctantly allowed her into his car. Audrey witnessed the scene, approaching Frank's car. However, Frank signaled for her to stay away. Subsequently, due to Lola's threat, Frank had no choice but to leave Audrey's house. Numerous police officers were in pursuit of Frank, but he employed tactics to outsmart them, navigating through the beach, village, and even a parking lot within a building. Ultimately, he successfully evaded the police. Meanwhile, at Audrey's house, many officers arrived, providing Frank with a background file. The police suspected Frank's involvement in Jack's kidnapping plan, though Audrey maintained her belief in Frank's innocence. Later in the afternoon, Frank reached a used car dump, where he and Jack exited the vehicle. Yanni personally met Frank, instructing Jefferson to deliver $5 million in $100 bills within 2 hours. The money had to be in a waterproof suitcase. Jefferson was then directed to go alone to Bayer Park and place the suitcase in the trunk of a parked blue Chrysler. Confused, Jefferson expressed uncertainty about obtaining $5 million in such a short time, but Yanni believed Jefferson had the means. Concerned for Jack's safety, Jefferson inquired about a guarantee that his son wouldn't be harmed. Yanni explained that if Jefferson exceeded specific time intervals, body parts of Jack would be sent as a gruesome reminder. This caused significant distress for Jefferson and Audrey. Subsequently, one of Yanni's men took Jack, who reassured them that Frank wouldn't let anyone harm him. Yanni warned Frank to leave, but Frank noticed a bomb cable hanging under his car. Soon, Frank departed by car, while Gianni and his associates left by boat. Lola attempted to detonate a bomb in Frank's car, but he successfully disarmed it. Frank then reached out to Jefferson, but U.S. Marshal Stapleton answered. Urging Stapleton to act swiftly using a plane due to 3 ships heading north, Frank faced Jefferson's anger. Deciding to return home, Frank contacted his friend recently arrived from France, instructing him to vacate the house and head to Miami Beach. However, as Tyrone was leaving, the police arrived and arrested him. Subsequently, Frank called Audrey, asserting his innocence in Jack's kidnapping. Tearfully, Audrey learned about the events at the doctor's office. At the police station, Tyrone faced questioning about why he hadn't identified himself as an inspector. Tyrone expressed astonishment at Miami's technological sophistication, clarifying that he wasn't Frank's friend but knew him amicably. Frank went to the building where the doctor worked, accessing the security room to copy files. In the doctor's room, he took a poison injection brought by thugs to harm Jack. Suddenly, a person named Smith arrived, compelling Frank to drop the injection. Unfortunately, the injection broke due to being shot by Smith's men. Frank easily defeated Smith and then departed from the location. Jefferson proceeded to Bayfront Park, discreetly placing the suitcase in the trunk of the blue Chrysler. Frank called Tyrone, who was occupied cooking for the U.S. Marshal. To Frank's surprise, Tyrone conversed casually, stating that the police now respected him since they knew his position. Frank shared a photo of a thug posing as a doctor with Tyrone, asking him to identify the individual. It was revealed that the thug was a Russian biologist specializing in biological warfare, residing at King Street No. 11 in Miami. After this revelation, Frank confided in Tyrone about his complex situation. Following the call, Frank headed to the address of a thug named Dimitri. Upon reaching Dimitri's room, Frank spotted him attempting to escape. A pursuit ensued, spanning buildings, bridges, and even a jet ski ride in the sea. Eventually, Frank caught up with Dimitri and questioned him about the liquid in the injection intended for Jack. Dimitri remained silent, prompting Frank to inject the liquid into the thug's thigh, knowing it would adversely affect his health. Meanwhile, Audrey and Jefferson, anxious about Jack's condition, blamed Frank for becoming a target due to his fame. They proceeded to Jack's location, finding him locked in a truck. Initially, the police used a tool to open the truck door, but it encountered issues. Unable to wait, Audrey took matters into her own hands, opening the truck door herself. Indeed, Jack was inside the truck. Audrey and Jefferson embraced Jack, while Frank continued pursuing Dimitri. Dimitri led Frank to a location resembling a laboratory with patients. Secretly trailing Dimitri, Frank observed his encounter with someone seeking information about Sovich. However, the man directed Dimitri to sit, indicating that Sovich was present. As Frank explored further, he noticed individuals resembling patients lying on beds. When approaching one of them, a formidable man emerged, initiating a confrontation in which Frank initially fell but ultimately triumphed. The commotion caused by Frank's fight reached Dimitri and Sovich, prompting Dimitri to seek an antidote for the virus. With only 2 doses available for Sovich and Pov, Dimitri shot Pov, asserting that 2 doses sufficed for him and Sovich. Before Sovich could administer the antidote, Frank intervened, injecting Dimitri with water instead of the virus liquid and subsequently eliminating Dimitri. Poff's demise spurred Sovich to elucidate the nature of the virus, a double-mutated waste liquid causing the infected person to breathe death. Sovich explained that the virus would cease after 24 hours. Suddenly, Sovich tossed 2 tubes of antidote out the window. Reacting swiftly, Frank leapt out of the window, but regrettably, only 1 tube remained intact. Frank returned to his car, exchanging his torn and wet shirt with a new one from the trunk. Subsequently, he headed to Audrey's house, where he called her. Audrey, unaware of Frank's proximity, displayed joy upon seeing him and embraced him warmly. Frank shared the news about Jack contracting a virus that spreads through breathing but reassured Audrey by presenting an antidote. After injecting the medicine into Jack and Audrey, Frank mentioned the potential risk of the virus spreading if Jefferson attended the conference. Outside the house, a vigilant policeman noticed broken glass, signaling a break-in. When Frank emerged from Jack's room, he found himself surrounded by several policemen, whom Jack skillfully fended off. Meanwhile, Jefferson, en route to the conference center, received a call from Audrey, notifying him of the virus exposure. Unfortunately, Jefferson struggled to comprehend the message clearly. With the situation escalating, Frank contacted Tyrone, still at the Miami police station, seeking assistance. Tyrone, realizing Frank's predicament, advised him to uncover information about the case. Tyrone disclosed the identity of a man named Gianni, indicating that Gianni worked for those seeking trouble, such as the Red Brigade. Providing Frank with Gianni's home address, Tyrone's actions didn't go unnoticed by the police, who detected unauthorized access on the 15th floor. As police patrolled in search of Frank, he managed to escape and depart in a taxi. The following day, Johnny aimed to administer the antidote to make himself invulnerable. However, Frank abruptly stormed Johnny's residence, prompting Johnny's men to open fire on the taxi Frank was driving. Evading the onslaught, Frank sought refuge in Johnny's garage, discovering a multitude of armed men ready to confront him with various weapons, including axes and iron pipes. Undeterred, Frank unleashed his mastered combat moves, triumphing over the opposition. Proceeding towards the stairs to access Johnny's house, Frank encountered more of Gianni's men, yet he adeptly overcame them, utilizing a fire extinguisher and pipes. Upon entering Gianni's house, a clash ensued with Lola, and once Frank emerged victorious, he embarked on a pursuit of Johnny, who had escaped via a helicopter. Following Lola's defeat, Frank trailed Johnny's helicopter in his car. Ultimately, Johnny reached the airport and boarded his private plane. Frank persisted in the pursuit, managing to infiltrate Gianni's plane through the front wheel. A confrontation ensued, leading to an unintentional gunshot by Johnny, hitting the pilot and causing the plane to experience a turbulent descent into the sea. In the midst of the chaos, Frank and Gianni engaged in a fierce struggle. Moments later, the plane crashed into the sea, prompting both Frank and Gianni to swim to the surface. Fortunately, they survived, only to be met by the awaiting police. Following his survival, Frank went to the hospital to visit Jack, Audrey, and Jefferson. Although initially considering giving flowers to Audrey, witnessing their joyful interaction in the room led him to change his mind. Instead, he left the flowers with the nurse. Subsequently, Frank headed back to his car, driving Tyrone to the airport for his return to France. Shortly after entering his vehicle, Frank received a call from an individual seeking the services of a transporter. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.